Okay. Dorian Redburn has lived in Philadelphia suburbs throughout her life. She loves to learn and has 3 college degrees from Westchester and Widener. Her many jobs include high school teacher, martial arts instructor, and IT project management. Now she is starting to write stories about the edge of the side. Join me in welcoming Dorian.
This is a short story, The Growing Solution. One summer morning, Alice made up 2 of her special recipes, one for growing roses, the other for her son's iced tea. She put one pitcher in the refrigerator, the other she used to water her flowers in the garden. Around noon, Sean got out of bed, wandered into the kitchen, and grabbed the pitcher. "Hey, Mom," said Sean as he drank a big gulp. "Is this a new tea? It tastes different." "It's the same recipe I always use." Later, Alice found her son sitting on the sofa watching TV. His hair was dark, long, and tangled. "Did you take a shower today? Or eat lunch? Or look for work?" Sean ignored her. Alice made up a tray of sandwiches and sat down next to Sean. "Here, have something to eat." "That tea tastes better each time I drink it," said Sean. "It's a little gritty at the bottom." He stood up, turned off the TV, and stretched his arms. "I think I'll take a walk." Alice picked up the glass and smelled that sandy material. "What is this stuff? This isn't tea. Will this hurt him?" I wondered. Later that day, Alice found Sean asleep on the couch. Well, he didn't die. She thought, he must be okay. The next morning, Alice awoke, hearing the sounds of clangs and bangs downstairs in the kitchen. She pulled on her housecoat and walked closely down the stairs. "Hey, Mom, can you help me make scrambled eggs?" Sean ate everything and then cooked more eggs himself. "Thanks, Mom. Are there any errands you'd like me to do?" Every day, Alice gave Sean the growing solution. "I never knew you could do all these things," said Alice, as she watched her son fix up the roof. Sean stopped and looked down at his mother. "The house is falling apart. I mean, someone's got to do it, right?" Alice examined his son. "Your pants keep falling down, and your feet are pushing through the front of your shoes. As soon as my Social Security check arrives, we can visit the thrift shops." Summer gave way to a beautiful autumn. The trees changed of color. Sean kept growing, became well-muscled with wide shoulders and tanned skin. His hair changed from brown to auburn. "I got a job in Mike's Hardware. I'm going to work as many hours as they'll let me," Sean smiled. "Now I can help out." As the days grew shorter and colder, Sean started sleeping longer and moving slower. He would wake up with the sun, eat, go to work, but could barely stay awake long enough to get home. One day, Sean didn't wake up. "Sean, wake up!" yelled Alice. He was sound asleep. As Alice moved Sean's arm, she saw his hair falling out. Eventually, Sean stopped breathing. Alice didn't know what to do. She didn't want to call the doctor. That would cost too much. "Maybe he's hibernating," she thought. She checked him every day. He didn't move or decay. After 2 weeks, his skin was brown and leathered. His body was smaller, but his feet were very large. She remembered that some plants would grow again if the roots were left there. She decided to plant Sean in the garden. Alice found a covered area near the wall. She dug a hole for her feet and used a stake to stand him up. She covered him in burlap and resolved to wait until spring, just in case. Then in March, when the daffodils were getting ready to pop up, Alice sprinkled the rooting solution over Sean's garden. Every day she checked and watered the garden. One morning, green hair started growing all over Sean's body. In 2 weeks, the skin softened, the hair browned, and the body straightened. Alice touched Sean's face, and her eyes opened. "I'm hungry," she said, and walked into the house. Maybe we should need to move a warmer area. Maybe in the south," she said. "And aren't you cute?" said Alice. She watered a circle of tiny plants where her feet had been. "I've been waiting for grandchildren."
When Kendall Redburn was 9, his grandmother said about him, "That boy ain't right." That comment pretty much sums up his life. Recently turned 60, Kendall really doesn't care what others think and intends to only do fun and creative things for the rest of his life. He likes writing, photography, hiking, JavaScript, dancing West Coast swing, cooking, and making miniature geyser fountains. Join me in welcoming Kendall.
Interestingly, that comment came from my Uncle Bert. This is Shadows of Laura. It's a tribute. I have to tell you that my mother passed away last Christmas. After a wonderful dinner and a day spent with her grandkids and great-grandkids, she fell asleep in her favorite chair and never woke up. I gave her a 10 out of 10 for landing the perfect landing, sticking the perfect landing. That next week, my wife and I flew down to Fort Myers, Florida to visit with my dad. He and my older brother, who lives nearby, had my mom cremated and would inter her ashes in Sarasota after a memorial in May. So 5 months later, we flew once more to the Sunshine State for the memorial, where I met my mom's younger brother, my Uncle Bert, and his partner, Lee. I had not seen my Uncle Bert in 50 years. I had never met Lee, but I already knew I liked them. You see, these two men would take my mom on a cruise or some other extravagant trip every year. And that's all my mom would talk about for months, months before and months after. And it quickly became a Christmas tradition for me and my wife to help with funds and occasionally airfare for these trips. So I already knew I liked these men, but what I did not and could not expect was that my Uncle Bert would fall in love with my wife. Lee was not amused, but I was. Lee came around, and the four of us had a wonderful time together over the next 4 days, but sadly we all had to return home and resume our lives. But before then, my wife and I promised we would visit them in Springfield. But first, a little background. Bert and Lee were one of the 11 couples to sue the state of Illinois for the right to marry, which they won. Bert calls Lee his partner. Lee calls Bert his husband, repeatedly, to everyone he can, because he had to sue for the right to have one. From that time forward until recent, Bert and Lee have designed and built and driven the gay pride float in every Illinois state parade for 12 of the last 15 years. Now this last July, my wife and I visited Bert and Lee in Springfield, and on Friday nights there's an informal gathering of the community at a local watering hole, where the first person I am introduced to says, "I knew your mother." Which is odd, because Springfield is 1,200 miles from Fort Myers. So I smile and say thank you, and Bert introduces me to another of his friends who also says, "I knew your mother." And so does the next, and the next. And suddenly, magically, there they were, shadows of Laura. Who were these strangers in the middle of the country that all knew my mom? Unbeknownst to me, year after year, my mother had been making a pilgrimage to visit her brother, and each year she helped him and his friends and his community decorate the Pride Float for the State Fair Parade, because that's what love is. I had discovered an ethereal trail of soap bubbles and followed it into a mystical land filled with a delicate nectar of memories and moments. It was a trail that led, over the next few days, in and around the city of Springfield, from the park where we watched the fireworks, to a used vinyl shop, to an Applebee's on the Strip. And each stop on that trail delivered to me an echo from the past of a friend my mother had made during her own travels there before me. Sadly, sweetly, every trail must end. Ours ended on a Wednesday night. My wife and I, and Bert and Lee, were dinner guests at Dave and Mike's house. A husband and wife, a husband and partner, invited guests in the home of two other married men. I could only marvel at the unfathomable thread of events, connections, and handshakes that had placed me there. 6 cozy friends, sharing food, playing Yahtzee, laughing, telling stories, and everywhere I looked were echoes and shadows of Laura.